You disappeared, and maybe no one noticed. But the most brutal truth, the one that accompanies you through the dark days, is that not even when you were present did anyone really see you. You were an ignored presence, a muffled voice, a body occupied by a soul tired of trying to be enough, try to be seen, trying to exist in a way that someone would finally say, "You matter." Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you still crawl through life?" And you ask yourself, why do you crawl? Maybe because you were taught that, to deserve love, you had to disappear from yourself, hide your essence, silence your pain, pretend strength where there was only exhaustion. You crawl through old memories, through voices that said, "You're too much. You feel too much. You demand too much." And then you decided to be less intense, less true, less you. And in that silent process, you disappeared. He disappeared into the crowd. He disappeared from relationships. He disappeared from his own story. But the most painful thing is that no one noticed. No one stopped to ask why his eyes no longer had a sparkle, why his laughter seemed programmed, why you started avoiding the places where you were once a regular. You slowly disappeared, first of the photos, after the talks, after you, and yet, nothing has changed. The world followed. People continued their routines, as if you were never really part of anything. But there's something no one told you. That disappearance is often a scream, a cry from the soul asking to be noticed, because there is a pain that arises not from abandonment, but from indifference, not from the absence of others, but from the absence of oneself. And now maybe you're here trying to understand why it hurts so much, why being invisible hurts more than being alone. Why does your soul cry even when you say you're fine? Because the truth is this: you never wanted to disappear. You just wanted to exist with dignity, to be touched with presence, to be heard with real silence, to be seen in its entirety. And this pain, the one you try to bury every day, it is not weakness. It's a reminder that your soul is alive, and she got tired of crawling. So tell me, have you ever looked in the mirror and no longer recognized yourself? Have you ever felt like no one really knows you? That if you left today, the world would lose nothing? If these questions cross your mind, stay with me. Because maybe, for the first time, you're about to see yourself. And what comes next will touch exactly where you try to hide the most. So, if something inside you was touched, if that silence you carry finally felt translated into words, let that be on record. Write in the comments, "I am here, and now I see myself." Because when you write, you recognize yourself. You make your presence felt. You begin to truly exist, not only in the world, but within yourself. This video is not just content. It's a mirror, a safe place where your pain has a voice, where your absence is felt, where your soul is welcome. And understanding this, understanding what is behind each word, is the first step towards your healing. That's why you shouldn't just watch, you should dive in. So if this made sense, leave a like. Because when you do this, you are saying to the universe, this kind of truth needs to reach more people. And if something here has awakened you, subscribe to the channel, not to follow another profile, but to follow a journey. Because here, every video is an invitation, and every invitation is a chance for you to come back to yourself. Have you ever had that suffocating feeling that even if you simply cease to exist, no one would notice? As if your absence were more comforting to the world than your presence? This isn't an exaggeration. It's not drama. It's a kind of silent pain that only those who have given too much of themselves, felt too much, waited too much. No, you exist in fragments, trying to be enough, trying to be good enough for someone to finally see you with the truth. But deep down, all you find is silence. And this silence slowly kills you. Not because it hurts, but because it confirms what you've always feared, that you've never really been seen. Have you ever walked into a room and felt like you could walk past everyone there without anyone looking up? Have you ever been in relationships where it felt like you were shouting, even when you were silent, and yet there was no echo? This kind of invisibility corrodes your soul. And then you start to wonder what's wrong with you. Why can other people be noticed, desired, valued, and you can't? What part of you needs to be erased to finally be loved? But perhaps the question is different. Why did you have to learn to hide? At what point in your life did someone make you believe that to deserve affection you had to disappear? Maybe it was when they called you too intense, or when they laughed at your tears, or when you offered everything you had and still, it was exchanged for nothing. That's where the deepest pain arises, that of having been invisible until you most needed to be seen. You were conditioned from an early age to believe that being discreet, quiet, and easygoing would make you lovable. That love came as a reward for not bothering, for not feeling too much, for not showing your wounds. And so you became good at it, at hiding, at slowly fading away, at disappearing even while you were there. But there's a weariness that begins to grow, a weariness of the soul, because living in disguise requires energy, because every time you say everything's fine when it's not, you lose a little more of yourself. Every time you laugh at a pain no one notices, your essence fades, until the day you no longer recognize yourself, until the day when you look in the mirror, all you see is a reflection without identity. You're there, but you're not. You live, but you don't feel. You walk, but you don't move within. And you know what's cruelest? Even in this state of near emotional death, the world goes on. People go on. The days go by as if nothing were wrong. And you learn to survive. You learn to silence your screams. You learn to accept crumbs as if they were banquets. You learn to pretend you don't miss something you never truly had. Deep connection. But there's something inside you that still pulses. A spark. Something that, however small, still insists on existing. It's what brought you here. It's what made you click on this video. Because somewhere, even hurt, even exhausted, you still want to understand why this pain insists on following you. Why this feeling of not belonging feels like a cycle that never breaks. Why even surrounded by people, you still feel alone. The answer isn't simple, but it exists. And it begins when you recognize that the problem was never that you felt too much. The problem is how much you were taught that feeling was weakness, that showing vulnerability was opening yourself up to being discarded, that being truly seen was too dangerous. And so, throughout your life, you created masks. Masks of self-sufficiency, of strength, of lightness, all to hide your inner chaos, all to avoid frightening those who wouldn't know how to handle your depth. But these masks, over time, leave their mark. They weigh, they suffocate, because the soul wasn't born to hide. The soul was born to shine, to show itself, to be felt. That's why disappearing hurts. Not because you've distanced yourself from others, but because you've distanced yourself from yourself. You've been erasing yourself in the hope of being chosen. You've been giving up small parts of yourself to keep people around. But now, perhaps for the first time, you're beginning to realize the price is too high, that remaining invisible to others will never make you visible to yourself. And this is where something needs to change. Not out there, in here, because no one can truly see you while you hide yourself. And I know, it's not easy, because showing who you are after so long being gone seems scary. It seems risky, but maybe that's exactly what your soul is asking for right now, for you to stop crawling, for you to start remembering your wings. And before I continue, I want to ask you something. If these words resonated with you, if you felt described, felt, perhaps even laid bare, write in the comments, I exist, and now, I want to be seen. Because when you write, you give voice to the part of you that has been silenced for so long, and that is already the beginning of healing. Have you ever noticed how the deepest pain isn't the one that comes from outside, but the one that arises within you, when you choose to deny yourself to be accepted by others? Abandonment, the kind that hurts more than silence and rejection, doesn't begin the moment someone leaves. It begins long before that. It begins when, still believing that love is something you earn with effort, you begin to push yourself aside, little by little, without fanfare, just molding yourself, adapting, erasing yourself. The cruelest abandonment isn't the one you suffer. It's the one you inflict on yourself trying to be what others expected. You try so hard to be light, calm, and pleasant. You keep quiet in arguments. You hide your traumas in conversations. You pretend everything is fine when your world is crumbling inside, all to maintain a kind of peace that in reality destroys you. And as contradictory as it may seem, this desperate attempt to be loved ends up distancing you from the very thing you desire most, true connection. Rumi said, "On the outside you are a drop. On the inside you are an entire ocean." And it is in this contrast that the pain resides, because you show the drop, a polite smile, and it's okay, a molded demeanor. But no one dives into the ocean. No one sees what truly pulses within you. No one hears the muffled scream, the cry you learn to swallow, the desires you stifle in the name of fragile acceptance. And by presenting yourself as less than, you attract relationships that only connect with the surface, never with your essence. True abandonment is spiritual. It's when you disconnect from your soul, trying to fit into molds that have nothing to do with your truth. It's when you trade your sensitivity for armor, your intuition for someone else's reason, your depth for superficiality, just to avoid appearing too much. And all of this because you learned that being authentic could be dangerous, that showing who you really are alienates. But no one taught you that hiding who you are also suffocates, and suffocates from the inside out. And then the cycle begins. You deny yourself, hoping to be noticed. You surrender, hoping to be loved. You adapt, hoping to be chosen. But each of these attempts comes with a high price, the ever-widening distance between you and your soul. And the more you disconnect, the emptier you feel, not because there's no love available in the world, but because the only love that heals, your love for yourself, has been forgotten in the process. It's not that people don't love you. It's that they love the version of you that was created to please. They don't know the woman who cries silently, who feels deeply, who carries old wounds but still has hope. They don't know you because you stopped showing them. You decided you didn't deserve to be loved just the way you are. You believed that to avoid rejection you needed to hide. And so the abandonment began, internal, silent, devastating. The soul feels this. It tries to call you back. It tries to whisper in your ear when everything goes quiet. It tries to show in the details of everyday life that you're too far away from yourself. But we've learned to ignore these signs. We've learned to move forward even when everything inside us asks for a pause, asks for listening, asks for reunion. You disappeared trying to be what they expected. But what your soul wanted, and still wants, isn't perfection. It's acceptance. It's not performance. It's presence. It wants to be seen as it is. With all your pain, with all your light, with all the intensity that makes you unique. And as lonely as this path may seem, it's the only one that leads back to you. And curiously, it's only when you truly see yourself that the right people begin to see you too. Because the universe responds to your truth, not to your disguise. And perhaps your healing begins when you stop begging to be loved and start allowing yourself to be whole. To acknowledge every part of yourself that was left behind in the attempt to please. To go back and seek those parts, one by one, with care, with patience, with love, and tell them, I see you, I feel you, I won't leave you anymore. This process is slow, yes, it's often painful, because rediscovering your soul after years of internal exile requires courage. But this is the path to true liberation, to true awakening, because no healing is real if it doesn't go to the core of your pain. No reconnection is true if it doesn't start from your most forgotten essence. And no transformation is complete if you still insist on abandoning yourself to be accepted. If you've made it this far, I'd like to invite you to leave the following sentence in the comments. My soul no longer accepts crumbs. Write this down, consciously, symbolically, because sometimes the first step to being seen is declaring that you're ready to see yourself too. There's something no one tells you because maybe not everyone knows. Maybe because many are still stuck in the same cycle of trying to be accepted while rejecting themselves. But there is a key, a hidden key, and it's not in the other. It's not in the recognition of others. It's not in the eternal wait for someone to come along and tell you that you matter. This key lives within you. It always has. And what no one told you is that until you see yourself, no one else will see who you really are. No one sees you until you decide to see yourself first. And I'm not talking about looking in the mirror, dressing up on the outside, completing tasks and demonstrating functionality. I'm talking about a different kind of vision, a silent, spiritual vision, an encounter with your soul, with what you were forced to abandon to fit into the molds life imposed on you. Because yes, the invisible also has power, and it is precisely there that your strength is stored. You spent so long waiting for someone to rescue the parts of you you'd hidden, waiting for someone to notice how tired, how hurt, how exhausted you were of feigning lightness while carrying an entire world inside your chest. But the truth that hurts, and at the same time liberates, is that no one will save you from this pain, because this pain isn't a sign that you're broken. It's a reminder, a call, an awakening. When you begin to accept yourself in the darkness, something changes. When you embrace yourself even on the days when you don't feel enough, when you stop running from yourself and decide to stay, even when it hurts, even when everything seems confusing, the world begins to recognize you from a different place. Because the frequency changes, the energy field changes. You stop emitting silent cries for help and begin to vibrate presence. And presence, when it's true, is magnetic. You no longer need to beg for attention. You no longer need to try to be noticed in places where your soul has been ignored for too long. Because true healing begins when you look at yourself with eyes of compassion. When you stop judging yourself for your wounds and start honoring them as marks of survival. You are not weak for hiding. You are strong for having survived anyway. And now, it is this strength that is being summoned. The hidden key to healing isn't becoming someone else. It's remembering who you are beneath all the layers pain has forced you to create. It's accessing that inner place that no one has ever touched, but that has always been there. The part of you that still believes, that still dreams, that still longs to be whole. And when you touch that part, movement begins from the inside out. The external world is a reflection of the internal. It always has been. When you see yourself as worthy of love, worthy of presence, worthy of being, relationships change. What once seemed unattainable begins to come closer. Connections become more genuine. Conversations gain depth. And above all, you stop begging to be chosen, because you understand that the most important choice is already yours, to remain with yourself. Acceptance in the dark is a silent ritual. It's when, even amidst chaos, you decide not to run away. When, before the mirror of your soul, you whisper, "I stay," even hurt, even confused, even tired. And this gesture, seemingly small, has a cosmic impact, because the universe responds to your courage. Life begins to reorganize itself around your decision to no longer abandon yourself. And make no mistake, this choice will scare some people. It will upset those who only knew how to deal with the hidden side of you. But that's okay, because you didn't come into this world to be tolerated. You came to be whole, to occupy the space that is rightfully yours, to manifest your presence truthfully. And this is only possible when you stop trying to be light all the time and accept your darkness as a sacred part of the process. You don't need to heal to be loved. You need to love yourself to begin healing. And loving yourself includes embracing your mess, your silence, your fear. Loving yourself means stopping demanding perfection from yourself, which only makes you sick. It's saying, even so, I'll stay. Even when everything screams for you to disappear, you choose to stay. And this choice is indeed an act of power. You're not broken. You're in the process of remembering who you are. And this process, as painful as it may seem, is an alchemy. It's the transformation of abandonment into presence, of pain into wisdom, of silence into voice. And it all begins with the simple yet profound decision to see yourself, to embrace yourself, to allow yourself to exist fully with all that you are. If you've made it this far, if these words sparked something inside you, leave a comment. I recognize myself in the dark. Because sometimes writing this down is the first step to your soul remembering the way back. Maybe you did it without realizing it. One day you simply woke up and no longer wanted to be where you always were. It wasn't a logical, planned decision. It was visceral. Your body no longer wanted to participate in those empty conversations. Your soul could no longer sustain itself in the same places where you once insisted on remaining, just to avoid being forgotten. And so you began to withdraw, at first subtly. You canceled a date, responded to a message more coldly, avoided opening that group chat on your phone, and, little by little, you disappeared from other people's routines, but especially from your own. You disappeared from social media. You disappeared from constant exchanges. You disappeared from expectations, even from your own. And do you know the strangest thing? Almost no one noticed. The absence that was so meaningful to you was, for many, just another silence. Maybe someone asked about you once or twice but didn't insist. Maybe they interpreted your silence as coldness, as distance, as disinterest. No one saw that. Behind that distance there was an old pain crying out for relief. But in the silence, something changed. For the first time, you didn't rush to explain yourself. For the first time, you didn't try to justify your exhaustion, your need to disappear, your urgency to go back inside. You just stayed. And in that staying, in that retreat, in that separation from the noise of the world, you began to hear something you hadn't heard in a long time. Yourself. You stopped begging to be chosen. You stopped molding your presence to fit the desires of others. You stopped chasing after those who always offered you emotional crumbs. You began slowly to choose yourself. And choosing yourself, after a lifetime of trying to be chosen by others, is an act of enormous courage. Because choosing yourself hurts. It dismantles everything you've learned about belonging, about love, about worth. But it also liberates. Before, you screamed for attention. You tried to be noticed through conquests, affection, and excessive availability. You put yourself last, hoping that someone would finally put you first. But that time has passed. Now, your absence is the echo that resonates. And to your surprise, others have begun to feel it. The same absence that was ignored for so long now causes discomfort. Now, questions begin to arise. Where is she? Have you seen so-and-so? She's gone, right? It's not revenge. It's not a game. It's a consequence. Because when you stop screaming, the silence speaks louder. And when you stop chasing, your absence becomes the space where others are forced to face how much of a difference you made, even when they pretended not to. What was once invisible begins to take on weight. Your absence begins to be felt because, finally, you've stopped begging for presence. You've stopped giving yourself away in pieces. And that changes everything. You started listening to yourself. You started feeling your desires. You started remembering what gives you pleasure. You started walking toward yourself, even if afraid, even if uncertain. You still feel the pain of loneliness sometimes, but it's no longer despair. It's just a space between you and the new version that's emerging. Because when you choose yourself, solitude becomes fertile silence, sacred space, healing territory. And in that territory, you began to remember that you have value even when you're doing nothing, that you have power even when you're not the loudest person in the room, that your presence carries weight, has truth, has soul, and that those who didn't feel this before didn't have the depth to delve into you. It's not that you were too much, it's that they were too little for your intensity. Your absence now speaks. It doesn't beg, it doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, but it teaches. It teaches that you're a rare presence. It teaches that you're no longer available for shallow places. It teaches that whoever wants you around will need to know how to dive. And that's scary. It's scary because you're no longer where you've always been. You're no longer trying to hold on to what no longer makes sense. Now, you want truth. And truth begins when you stop pretending you're okay with the little. You're no longer accessible to just anyone. And that's not pride. It's awareness. You've begun to understand that not everyone deserves access to your heart, that it's not selfish to protect your energy, that it's not weakness to walk away to rebuild yourself, and that the love you've always sought outside begins within, in silence, in solitude, in surrender. Maybe, right now, you're still in this process, still in the midst of transition, still questioning yourself. But even there, halfway through, you can already feel that something has changed. Because now, even though you've disappeared, you're more present in yourself than you've ever been in the eyes of others. And it's from here that everything begins to transform. If this text spoke directly to you, if you felt as if your last few weeks were described here, write in the comments, "I choose myself, even when no one else chooses me." This sentence is an affirmation, a portal, a beginning. Because whoever begins to choose themselves begins, little by little, to return home. You didn't disappear. And even though everything around you tried to convince you of it, even though people used that verb to justify your absence, the truth is different. You didn't run away. You found yourself. And that's scary. It's scary because in the world's logic, those who distance themselves are wrong. Those who remain silent are in crisis. Those who change their rhythm are lost. But the soul has its own cycles. And when it needs to, it stops. When it asks, it remains silent. When it's ready, it returns. But it returns differently. It returns whole. It returns with awareness. Rumi said, "The soul always knows its way back home." And perhaps that path was never geographical. It was never about places, people, relationships. Perhaps that path was always inward, toward the center, to that inner space that for so long was neglected in the name of a love that never came. You spent years trying to be seen, trying to be accepted, trying to be needed, but there came a time when you understood that true abandonment wasn't what they did to you. It was what you did to yourself, trying to fit in. And then the awakening came. It didn't arrive with light. It didn't come in the form of sudden illumination. It came as exhaustion, and I can't take it anymore. A silent enough, a whispered enough through tears. And it was in this space of pain that the truth emerged, because consciousness is born this way, raw, uncomfortable, transformative. It breaks structures. It tears away masks. It confronts you with what has always been there, but which you preferred not to see. You began to see that your story wasn't made of failures, but of sincere attempts to be loved, that your pain wasn't weakness, but a constant reminder of your humanity, that your loneliness wasn't punishment, but a path of purification. And above all, you began to understand that the love you sought so fervently, in so many faces, in so many places, already existed. It was just misdirected, because you learned to love everyone, except yourself. This shift in consciousness doesn't happen all at once. It comes in waves. One day you notice you're breathing differently. The next, you realize that the person who hurt you no longer has power over your heart. You find yourself saying no firmly, choosing silence over validation, finding pleasure in being alone, finding beauty in simplicity, discovering peace where before there was only anxiety. And the most surprising thing is that in this process of reconnection, external things begin to reorganize themselves. People who ignored you begin to miss you. Spaces that oppressed you begin to seem too small. Cycles that once repeated themselves like a curse begin to unravel. Because when the soul awakens, everything around it must align. It's the law of the mirror. The external reflects the internal. It's always been this way. You're no longer in the same place. And I don't mean that physically. Your energy has shifted. Your frequency has risen. You're no longer vibrating need, desperation, or urgency. You're vibrating presence, choice, and truth. And this frightens those who still live on autopilot. It frightens those who still thrive on superficial relationships. But you didn't come into this world to be a rough draft. You are a masterpiece. And every masterpiece, when finished, demands reverence. Today, perhaps for the first time, you understand that what seemed like abandonment was actually the beginning of your reunion. It wasn't rejection. It was liberation. It wasn't loss. It was return. You've returned to yourself, to your soul, to the center where everything makes sense. And it's there that you begin to write a new story. A story where you are the protagonist, where your choices are guided by conscience and no longer by fear, where your presence doesn't depend on external approval, but on internal fidelity to your truth. You stopped being who they expected and started being who you were born to be. And that's revolution, because the world needs more awakened souls, more whole women, more presences who no longer accept half-hearted living. The turning point isn't an event. It's an ongoing process of remembering, feeling, and allowing yourself to be. You are not the pain you experienced. You are the wisdom born from it. If you've made it this far, if you felt each word was a reflection of your own journey, leave a comment. I came back to myself. Write with intention, with truth. Because declaring this is reaffirming what your soul already knows. The path back has always been within you. If you've stuck with me this far, that already says a lot about you. It says your soul is searching. It says you feel deeply, and that you're ready to truly rediscover yourself. So before I go, I want to invite you to continue this journey with me. Subscribe to the channel so we can walk side by side on this path of healing, presence, and awakening. Each video here is made as a mirror to remind you of who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. Leave a like if you felt welcomed here, because that means more people, who may be lost like you once were, will also find this space. And now, it doesn't stop there. The next video appearing on the screen is the continuation of this conversation with your soul. Click on it, dive deep, because what you started today is still just beginning. The journey isn't over, it's just beginning.